So today we're going to work on paper piecing these little log cabin blocks. They're about 4.5 inches finished. Oh, I'm sorry. They're 4.5 inches unfinished, 4 inches finished. We're going to work on paper piecing this and go over some tips and tools that I use while paper piecing. Thanks so much for watching. Hi all, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to work on the Dragon Fruit Block of the Month quilt pattern. This is a block of the month done by the Fat Quarter Shop, and it is paper pieced. And I know in the comments that some people had questions about paper piecing. I also know that paper piecing can seem evolved or frustrating to a lot of people, and I feel like the more different videos that you watch on it, the better it is for you to grasp it, especially when you're learning at home. So watch my video and maybe watch some other videos that are great that you like about paper piecing. So let's get into it. So we are going to work on these blocks over here. Today we're going to work on the mulberry block. I've already made these, and all of these blocks are part of month 1, and they make about 20 blocks total because there's 5 different colorways, 4 blocks each. These are all log cabin blocks, and this is a courthouse step. You get this paper piece pad with your block of the month, and in it, for each size, this is the 4-inch, but for each size it has all the different ones for that size. For example, it has the 4-inch courthouse steps, the 4-inch log cabin, and the square and the square and the economy. So today we're working on the log cabin. The way that you can tell in this situation between the log cabin and the courthouse steps is the log cabin has 2 of those small squares in the middle, whereas the courthouse steps has 3. Okay, so basically what we're going to do today is we're just going to cut this out based on the measurements. We are going to use these 3 fabrics, and we're going to cut 4 of each of the measurements, and they're going to be in strips. Now, when you use the paper pad, and we'll bring it up to the log cabin here. Here we go. When you use the paper pad, you see that there are numbers on here, right? So I have my numbers here that are going to correspond with this on here. These are, I forget what they're called, but these little number tiles you can get from Fat Quarter Shop, or you can get them on Amazon, or you can make your own. My daughter, sometimes when she cuts out things for me, she takes a Post-it note and she cuts it into small squares, a little bit smaller than this, and then she numbers it so I can keep track. So whatever works for you, you can do that. So as you can see here, each strip that we cut out is going to correspond to a number. I'll get up a little closer so you can see it. Each strip that you cut out is going to correspond to a number, like that. And so that top block that's 1 1/4 inch square, that goes in box 1. And I'll show you, it'll get less confusing as we go. Okay, so I'm going to cut out my strips and then I'll be back. What you're going to need for today, if you decide to sew along with me, will be your Dragon Fruit Block of the Month quilt pattern and the book, and return to the first month. You'll need the fabric for the squares, where whatever square you're working on. We're working on the mulberry block. I have these numbered tiles to keep track of which pieces go where. I'll show you that after I get it cut up. I usually use a small, I like the Creative Grids ruler with my paper piecing because it has the 1/4 inch mark. I'll show you how we'll use that later. There are specific rulers that you can get for paper piecing. I do have a couple of them, but this block is so little that I don't think I'm going to use it, but if it works for you, you can totally use it. Of course, I always have my handy dandy seam ripper and stiletto. And I use one of these glue sticks. This is a Sew-Line glue stick. This is a fabric glue stick. And I will say that before I got this, I had a real problem with gluing my fabric. But this one's not super sticky. It ends up just holding it for a minute. And because these squares are so small, I do end up using this quite a bit. So I'll show you this as we go along. You'll see how I use it. Additionally, you'll probably need some refills. Refills come in these little packages. The sticks are about this big. Again, you can get this on Amazon. Mine is kind of gloopy because I've had it for a while. You can get this on Amazon or at Fat Quarter Shop or other quilt stores. I'm not sure if Joann's has it, but they might. But it's pretty common. You can get it everywhere. Some of them look a little different, but in general, it's a Sew-Line glue stick holder. You'll need your rotary cutter to cut your fabric and to trim up your blocks when you're done, and probably a pair of scissors just in case. Okay, so I'm going to cut my strips and then I'll be back. Okay, so I've gotten all my fabric cut out and I put my little number tags on these. I think they're called alphabetis, but these are the numbered versions. So I have my number tags on here, and I have the numbers on here based on the order that they go on my paper, not the order that I cut them out, so that I'll just be able to go and grab them as I need them. Now, as you get better at this, you could definitely do all four of these at once. But to make sure that how I'm showing you this is clear for you, I'm just going to do one block at a time. So this is our number 1. Okay, it is the mint. And on the paper, you have the printed number side. And on the back, it's blank. Our fabric is going to go on the back. We're going to sew it on the back using the numbers as a guide. When you hold this paper up to the light, you will be able to see the lines through it. It's hard to do that on a video, so in this case, you'll just have to trust me. But if you hold it up to the light, you will be able to see the lines. Now, this next part, again, is up to you. So both 1 and 2 are the same size squares. Now you can take those squares and you can sew this seam here at the same time to put them both on at once. That's totally fine, but that's not what I'm going to do today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the number 1 block on here in the middle. I'm going to glue it down and I'm going to sew around it. I'm using matching thread, but I don't always when I do my paper piecing. If you don't use matching thread, do know that sometimes it will show through slightly. Someone would have to be really close up on your quilt to see it. If you're doing the quilt to be shown or to do something fancy, then you probably want to use matching thread. But if it's just going to be around the house, then you wouldn't need matching thread. So here's what I do. I hold my paper up to the light to make sure I have the number 1 box. And I'm going to take my glue stick and I'm going to put a little bit of glue right there in the middle. Let me check here. Yep. Okay, so I have my glue in the middle. Then I'm going to take my fabric. I'm going to place it just on the middle. Now, I will tell you that in this pattern, they have cutting guidelines for your fabric, and that's just fine. You can totally use that. But this is also a great way to use scraps. So if you're not using this quilt, if you're paper piecing something else, you can use scraps. And as long as your fabric is bigger than the lines, then you're okay. It doesn't have to be specific. So when you're cutting out this fabric, don't worry too much if it's not cut perfectly. it will still work out. Okay, so next we're going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew this on. Okay, we're at the sewing machine and I wanted to show you, so here are the lines and our fabric is on the back. But you're going to sew the lines. You're going to sew and follow the lines. So let's go ahead and do that. I almost forgot to mention, we should shorten our stitch length. If you forget to do it like I did, it's not a huge deal, but it does make it easier to cut off the paper later. Or take off the paper, rather. Okay, this is my square. You can see here, as the light's going through it, you can see that you can see it on the back. But remember, this is the back of the paper. Your fabric's on the back of the paper. Okay, so we've gotten this first one sewn on, and as you can see, it's on the back of the paper. And so now we need to do number 2. Now, this is our number 2, and remember, we're just doing 1. So I'll put that aside for now, but we're just doing 1 block right now. So here's our number 2. It's going to go on the back, face down. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. Usually what I do is I just hold this down with my finger, flip it over, take it to my machine, because we're just sewing this one seam. You can do that. Sometimes a corner will get bent or something and you'll have to fix that. So what I'm doing on this one, because it's so little, is I'm going to use my glue stick. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it here in my seam allowance. No one will see it or ever know. And it just gives me that little bit of security so I don't have to rip out again. So face down here. We're going to stitch along here and then we'll be able to flip it open. Okay, so we're going to stitch it on this line. Okay, so we've gotten this, we've gotten this one sewn here, right? And so you can take this to your iron if you want, and you can press it down. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to finger press. The other thing you can do is you can trim this up if it's a little bit long. Mine's not that long. These pieces are really tiny. I'm just going to leave it for this one. But now we're going to look for piece 3. I need to trim my thread. Okay, here's piece 3. We're going to take just one. And it's going to go at the top. So how I place these is I want this lined up with these pieces. Now, in this case, I happen to sew these exactly right on top of each other, so I didn't have to trim anything. So they're pretty even. So this, I'm going to line up with this edge, and I want it to kind of overhang on each side. So like that. And again, I can hold this and take it to my machine. Potentially, I could put a pin in there if I wanted, but I'm going to use my glue stick. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue within the seam allowance. And you can see that there. And then I'm going to sew this on and I'll be back. Okay, so we've sewn this on. As you can see, it just, the line was just little because these are little blocks. We're going to lay it down and fold this over. Now, at this point, we can look and see, again, mine was pretty close. You just pull it up, it comes up from the glue right there. And you can bend this on this sewn line. you can bend it like that. Okay, and then you have your excess fabric. Again, this is small. You don't necessarily have to do this. I'm going to use a small ruler. And these Creative Grid rulers, they have a 1/4 inch edge. And I'm going to line it up and see. Nothing really goes past my ruler, so I'm not going to worry about cutting that edge. So then we're going to go to piece 4. Okay, so here's our piece 3. Here's 4. So 4 is about the same size, maybe a hair longer than 3. I don't remember when I cut it, but it's about the same size. But we already have a partially sewn seam here. So we're going to fold it on that sewn part. And then we have this fabric hanging. We're going to take our ruler and our rotary cutter, and we're going to trim it like that. And open it back up. Okay, so now that is all ready. So we just finger press this, and you can use one of those roller wheels if you want. I'll probably take it to the iron after we do the 4, however you feel comfortable. But there's our 4. Okay, we get our piece 4 here. Put my used pieces up here. Okay, make sure we got it in the right spot. We're going to lay it down. That's all straight because we already trimmed it, right? That's pretty flat. I'm going to use the glue stick within the seam allowance and just put some glue. And you could probably get away with just putting like a dot or something. Whatever works for you. Remember, there's no quilt police. At least not here on my channel. Okay, so we're going to put this down like this. Press it down. It's on there. We don't have to worry about corners coming up. I'm going to sew this seam on the 4, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back. I have piece 4 sewn on. It looks pretty good. Now, when you look at my block, it is a little wonky. Not everything lines up. That's totally fine. In paper piecing, that's not a super big deal because you're sewing along the lines and it will fix itself as it goes along. I also took the iron to mine. My iron is just, I have an Olicio. It's set on the highest heat. It even has water in it for steam. It's not a huge deal. If you get a drop of water on your paper, you just need to be careful with it so it doesn't tear, but it won't be a big deal. I just press it for a minute and it's done. So we go on to section 5. We can check this, but we already trimmed it beforehand, so it's fine. So we'll go to the piece 5 and we'll fold it over on that line and exposing the fabric. You can see how it's folded over. Okay, so I'm taking my ruler and we're just going to, I match it up with the 1/4 inch and I trim off the excess. You do not have to do that if you don't want to. It just helps reduce the bulk a little bit, but if you don't want to do that, your block will still turn out just fine. So we're going to take piece 5 and we're going to do this, and we're going to keep doing this all the way around. Now again, we're going to line this up. We want it to go out, to extend beyond it just a little bit. And take my handy dandy glue stick here, put some glue on it. And I really do that because these pieces are so tiny, it's hard to hold. But as they get bigger on the outside layers, I don't do that. Okay, so we got it all glued down. We're just going to sew on this line and I'll be right back. Okay, I finger press that. I press it open. We already trimmed it, so we know it's good. So now we go on to piece 6. Now, there is not a stitch line on here because we didn't sew all the way around piece 2. That's okay. We're just going to do about. Now, that's where one of those rulers can come in that I talked about before, the paper piecing ruler. You could put your ruler right on there and kind of press on the outside. and make a crease. Okay. Oh, it's just the right size for this little ruler. On the next one, I'll probably have to go up a size. So I trim that at 1/4 inch. I open it up. Looks pretty good. We're going to take piece 6. Make sure I have it in the right spot. Of course, it's the side with the straight edge. Just put a little bit of glue on here to hold it on. Make sure it's about. Now, sometimes you'll get these where you accidentally place the piece crooked, or it's just not laying how you want when you put it on there, and then you sew it on and your piece is crooked. Honestly, it's fine, because you won't be able to tell it's crooked in the final project because of how you sew around on the lines. So try not to worry about that too much. Okay, we got piece 6 sewn on, and it looks good. It went on without a hitch. Okay, and again, so you can use one of those rollers if you want. You can just finger press it. You can take it to the iron. I usually just take mine to the iron every few pieces. It's not a big deal. Okay, so here we get to 7. Now, these lines are getting a little longer, and we want to fold it over so we can make sure that we have our 1/4 inch. Totally fair. There's the trick I showed you with the ruler, where you just kind of bend it against this bottom edge. That works just fine. But I wanted to show you, and again, I don't get anything for showing you these products. I don't even have an Amazon storefront. I'm just telling you about what I use. I have the add 1/4 rulers. So I got mine on Amazon. I think Kimberly Jolly sells some at the Fat Quarter Shop that might be pink. So where this comes in handy, so this is 1/4 inch. It's got a slight lip to it. If I can get that right for you. So I actually don't usually use that. I really like using the creative grid ones instead. But here you can see this is sloped, right? So it's thicker here and sloped here. You can kind of see a line here. Where that helps you is like when we have this seam, we're going to, well, it's not a seam yet, right? It's just a line on the paper. So you line that up with the paper and you fold this over. And then you press down. And there's your crease, right? Now, I have done paper piecing with and without these. They're one of those, to me at least, they're one of those fun things that is fun or nice to have, but not a necessity. So I'm just going to put those aside. So now we want to trim this to avoid bulk. I have a little bit bigger of a ruler. We're going to do this for 1/4 inch, and you can do that. I'll show you with this ruler. So there's this ledge. So you put it upside down and you pull it down, and then it doesn't move. That ledge hooks onto your fabric here. And so here's your 1/4 inch. So either way you want to do that. There's our 1/4 inch. Okay, and we're going to use piece 7. So we're going to take piece 7. And again, I'm still going to use a little glue. And just put it on here. And then we'll put the piece on here. Make sure it lines up, but extends a little over on each end. Okay, then we're just going to sew on this number 7 line. Okay, we're back. I gave it a little press, and now we're moving on to piece 8. Okay, we take our ruler, we're just going to line up the bottom edge. We fold it up here, fold it the rest of the way. we have our 1/4 inch. Okay, it's all ready for piece 8. Put a little glue here. Press it down, take it to the sewing machine. Okay. Trim up any of those loose threads. Finger press it down. Moving on to piece 9, which is right down here. Line it up. Press it up and over. Just make sure, yep. Okay, finished with piece 9. Give it a little finger press. Moving on to 10. And see, I will even say my line wasn't perfectly straight there, and it will still work out. So let's go over to piece 10. Flip this over. Line that up. Fold that over. Okay. And then we get piece 10. I think I can just hold it at this point, but I've been gluing it so far and that works pretty well, so we'll just do that again. Okay, we're working on number 11 now, so we will get this creased and fold it over. And then we will trim off the excess. Looks pretty good. Okay. Get piece 11. Oh, helps if we don't take the number with us. All right, handy dandy glue stick. Okay, and we'll sew it on. Okay, I have all of our threads trimmed. I have 11 sewn on. So now we'll sew on 12 and 13, and I'll come back and let you know after I've sewn on both those pieces. Okay, so we're back. I have sewn on all the pieces for this, and I just wanted to point out a couple of things here before we trim it up. So on this one, you're going to see maybe it doesn't reach the edge of your paper. That's okay. Don't worry about that. You flip this over and you'll see that there is do not trim on this line, trim on this line. So these papers already give you space for your seam allowance. This would be something you would check if you were doing a different pattern, but most patterns that I have seen do have the seam allowance outlined on there. So now all we do is trim this up. Okay, so now it's all trimmed with our seam allowance. We flip it over and you can see your fabric is all within that. And it's perfect. You don't have to worry about 1/4 inch seams or if everything didn't line up. It's perfect. And that's the beauty of paper piecing, right? It gets you those perfect seams. I will say you can tell that I didn't always get exactly on the line. Right there and right there. And yet still it looks pretty good. Now, as far as when to take these off the paper, you can take them off the paper. You can take these off the paper right after you do them if you like. I have not done that with these. So it's really easy to take off the paper. In a situation like this one, you could probably do it, you would do it just going along a line, right? Like you would take off this part and then this part and this part until you get all the way to the center. My children always like to help with that. So it's really easy. You just fold it back and forth. The paper's already kind of perforated from your sewing, and then it just tears. Like that. And you just do that all the way around until your paper's off. After your paper's off, you can iron it again if you like. I will probably leave the paper on mine for a while until I'm ready to sew these together because I feel like it keeps them stiff and flat until I'm ready to use them. But whatever your preference is. So thanks a lot for coming along with me today while I sewed these up. I really appreciate you watching my channel. Have a great rest of your day.